The Musashi Flex. Martial arts described in a novel, probably in greater detail than any book I've ever read. Not just science fiction, any book ever. So let's get into it. The Musashi Flex was written by the author Steve Perry in 2006. It takes place in a future sort of cyberpunk era. People can travel to different planets and things like that, but and they do. They travel around a bit in the story. But the main thrust, the main plot of the story, is following participants called flexers who participate in sort of an open kind of game of death that happens kind of anywhere. You could be ambushed anywhere, and it's called the Musashi Flex, or that's the name of this sort of game they play, or the Flex for short. And people who participate in it are called flexers. Now, in this game, there are rules. You are a participant if you enlist sort of online, and you move up the ranks. You can kill, you can be killed, or you may just be knocked out. Either way, when you are defeated, somewhere on your body, maybe on a necklace or in your shoe, you have a chit. And if someone can get that little chit from you, they can go and put that online, proving that they defeated you because they got their chit from you, and you go up in rankings. There are rules to the game, such as you can't challenge anyone who is more than 5 spots above you in ranking, and anyone who is like high ranked, like they can't just go and pick on people who are like 10 ranks below them, things like that. Now, the way the game works is you can be walking about anywhere in your daily life. You can be walking to the store, but if you're a flexer and another flexer steps out of the shadows or comes up to you, they can just challenge you. Now, you as the challenged, since you were the one being ambushed, you get we get 2 choices. First choice is, do you want to continue? Do you want to do this fight? And if you don't, if you think the person fighting you, you've heard that their rank is too high, they're way too powerful, you just give your chit over and you say, I don't want any part of you. Then the second choice you make is, okay, if I want to fight, I, as the one who is being ambushed or being challenged, I get to decide what weapons we use, if any. If it's empty hand, if it's knife, whatever. So that's the one thing you get is once you're challenged, you get to decide. So if you've got a knife on you and you're really good at like Silat or Filipino knife fighting, you get to say, well, I want to use a knife. And if the other person, they have a knife, they bust it out, and you guys go to town. And you can go until one of you gives up, or until one of you's knocked out, or until one of you taps out and submits, or until one of you's dead. That's the Musashi Flex. That's the sort of world that this is in. Now let's talk a little bit about the author real quick, Steve Perry. The author himself, Steve Perry, is a practitioner of Indonesian Silat. I believe it's the subsystem of Pencak Silat, which I have a black belt in. Now, that art is heavy in takedowns, ground fighting, but like dirty ground fighting. It's got the knife it focuses on is the karambit. If those of you who don't know what a karambit is, it is that knife that people hold. It's upside down, but it's meant to be held that way, and it's a reverse raptor claw, right? You hold it through one ring for the and through up here in the knuckles typically, and then there's a reverse raptor claw sort of look to that blade. That's called a karambit. I've heard it called a karambit, however you want to pronounce it. And Steve Perry has practiced this apparently all for like, I don't know, a quarter of a century now. I think he's still going on. And he wrote a book here that I read back in like 2006, 2007 when this book first came out. I've read it a few times since then, and it really is, honestly, because it was written by a martial artist, a pretty serious martial artist, from what I can tell and from what I've heard, that the descriptions of combat are actually pretty like spot on and pretty accurate. And the way he talks about training, there's training in the book that's not just how most movies do a montage or books will talk about a guy out there swinging a sword. That's kind of it's cool. I love movies like, say, Berserk. You guys see the anime or the manga Berserk? He gets better at fighting through experience and through slowly weighing down his sword over time, so he can learn to carry a bigger and bigger sword, and that's his training. Or if you see a montage like in Kill Bill, you'll see them just like hitting a board a lot and kicking a tree. Real training is diverse if you're trying to be good at combat, especially not just for competition performance, but for self-defense performance. That kind of training usually entails you got to be kind of all around. You've got to do some calisthenics. You got to do some pull-ups, but you got to do high repetitions of basic movements, high repetitions of jab, cross, or elbow, uppercut, whatever you're using for combat, elbows and knees, headbutts. You got to do high repetition of that. And then every once in a while, you'll throw in something fancy into your repertoire, and you'll kind of focus. Well, he talks about that. But what's interesting about the Musashi Flex is the main character is, and I want to get this right here, Laszlo Morn. Now, in this book, Laszlo Morn is a guy who's doing pretty good as a flexor. He's kind of like, not mid, but like upper mid ranking. And the first chapter opens with him being jumped right away. Now, here's something Laszlo's really interested in that the art of Indonesian Silat, actually, that the author trained in, is also interested in, and that is footwork. Footwork, body motion, body mechanics, how to sway out of the way, how to put your body in a place that the other person can't physically hit you. And even when your bodies do collide, the footwork then becomes like, I guess you would call it judo-esque, and how they're trying to get their feet in it close, and they'll do shin presses, they'll do foot stomps, they'll trip you, they'll do trips and sweeps, hip throws, breakdowns and takedowns to try, and but they're all doing it a lot with their feet while punishing you with the elbows, the hammer fists, and on and on and on. But Laszlo becomes obsessed with the steps, and I came to find out later this is like sort of a prequel, even though it doesn't read like. I mean, you can read it by itself. It's a prequel to it's part of a series called the Matador series. And it's a prequel to another series of novels that I want to get to someday, called The Man Who Never Missed and The 97th Step. These books are about a guy learning a martial art that makes it where it's almost impossible to hit him. And it has mainly to do with the footwork. Well, apparently Laszlo Morn is the guy who creates this martial art. Now, in it, there's just a few descriptions that I'll give you about combat that are actually pretty accurate. So here they are. For instance, what he says about the karambit here is, Harnett grinned, and a knife fight size mattered and would cut going and coming. That's true. That's how karambit kind of works. It slashes in, but kind of coming back out. It slashes back, and if it's smaller, it can actually do sometimes oftentimes more damage than a big blade. A big blade, people think it looks cool, and it does. It looks cool, like I said, the anime Berserk, the manga, he has a giant sword, and it looks awesome. And certainly swinging a sword that big can do a lot of damage. But in close quarters, having a smaller blade, like the size of your pinky, that's enough. Especially since it says in here in the novel that the karambit is more of a slashing weapon than it is like a stabbing. Because of that raptor claw hook, it can slash. I mean, use your imagination. It can slash just about anything. And here's another passage about turning the body and angling. Morn turned his body so that he was angled at maybe 50 degrees to Harnett, his left leg forward, his right leg back, feet just under a meter apart. He held the knives low by his groin, his other hand by his face. So he's basically angling in a way that you'd see in Silat, and you turn you turn your body sort of 50 degrees to reduce some of the targets on your body. I mean, by turning your body, you're reducing the number of targets. Something to keep in mind if you've never thought about it before, or maybe you've never trained or never thought about it like this, is everything on center line is the deadly stuff, really. I'm not saying it would be great to be shot in the arm, but think about all the peripheral shots, like the shoulder, everything. Center line is where all the major organs are. It's where everything is. It's where the brain is, down the center line, the throat, all the organs down through here, all the way down to the groin. So you'll see martial arts like Wing Chun, they go for attacking the center line all the time because they are empty hand. And what they figure is, if I'm going to chain punch anything on center line, that's going to be gravy, right? That's going to be perfect because everything on center line is soft, or not, maybe not soft, but it's a potent hit. It's vulnerable. If you can hit anything on center line with whatever, I mean, that's why they tell you to aim Well, they tell you to aim for center mass with pistols and firearms because the center mass is the hardest thing to get out of the way. If you aim for anything else, like arms or whatever, those can move, but the center mass is big. It's a big target. It's there. It's hard to move. So Laszlo in this scene is angling his body. Also, I'm reading some of the passages in here. It's honestly really like if you guys like the video game Cyberpunk 2077 or any like Blade Runner, it's a pretty cool little world that the author Steve Perry has created here. It's a pretty cool, like, just the world he's created. So there's a villain in here named Shaw. And I don't want to spoil anything for you, so I'll just tell you that Shaw is like a multi-trillionaire businessman who is pretty good at martial arts, and he's always wanted to be great at something. And for some reason, being a businessman, he's like a Lex Luthor kind of, but he's never been like Superman or Batman. He wants to be seen as a badass, right? So what does he do? He joins the Musashi Flex. So he's going around and tracking and stalking down all the flexors. And he's able to beat them, but he's getting to a point where he can't get above like 10th place or 11th place or whatever. And he develops this special drug. And it's so cool. It's kind of like the drug, if you guys have seen the Sci-Fi show or read the books of The Expanse. It kind of gives you a burst of adrenaline. It also focuses you. It enhances your muscles and your reaction time. So he becomes like like a Captain America super soldier serum or something. And he keeps testing it on himself and on others. And he's got the formula almost down. And so he starts recognizing that our main character, Laszlo Morn, is rising up in the ranks. And it comes down, as you can imagine. I don't think I'm spoiling anything by saying a showdown between the two, and it's pretty good. Now, Steve Perry peppers throughout the book. He peppers little bits of training and things in here, like I talked about in one of my last videos, is high repetitions of basic movements. And he starts really talking about that when it comes to footwork. In martial arts, footwork is by a lot of people seen as the most boring aspect. I think it's maybe the number one thing that when I teach students, they kind of want to go, yeah, okay, I got it. When do I learn how to do a spinning back? When do I learn how to do, like, a trap? Like, in Wing Chun, you do Pak Dan, you do some cool stuff, you do Lop, you do Chi Sao. They want to learn, like in judo, they want to learn the takedown. Like, okay, when do I do the hip throw, that cool hip throw? When do I do Sasai Suranagi? When do I learn Oguruma? All these takedowns that I've heard about and I've seen online. When do I learn that? And footwork is the hardest thing, I think, to get people excited about. But if you can break through their minds, and I think this book, if you read it, there's a few decent passages, pretty good passages that the main character Laszlo Morn will underscore for you the importance of being in the right position, whether you're at ranged or you're in close. I explain it this way when it comes to footwork, and I'm kind of borrowing some of it from what Laszlo Morn says in the book, but I'm going to put it in my own wording a little bit here. So imagine when you walked today, assuming you guys got out of your car and you walked to your job or you walked anywhere, you came to the McDonald's or wherever you went to eat. Hopefully you're eating better than McDonald's, but you went to wherever. Did you count the number of steps when you went there? Did you count how many? If you tripped a little bit on the way up and on the sidewalk and you quickly readjusted yourself, do you even remember doing that until I'm just saying it right now? Like, I'm saying it right now and reminding you right now that maybe you tripped today at some point. But do you really remember? You have to, oh yeah, I did trip on the way getting out of my car. But you know why you don't really remember it? It doesn't matter. Because you are a black belt at walking. You are a black belt at walking. You're a grandmaster at it, pretty much. You've been doing it since forever. So wherever you walk, you have a walker's gait. You have a walk. Even if you're kind of clumsy sometimes, you're way better than you were when you were 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old. So you have become a black belt of that. Now, when you run, there's different footwork, right? Running footwork doesn't look like walking footwork. Combat footwork is the exact same thing. And Laszlo Morn in this book, and the author Steve Perry does a good job of underscoring that point, is that if you are going to go into combat, your footwork it's different. And you have to be smart about it so that your footwork, it's like running against someone who's walking, right? If you're in a race and you know how to run, you've got the footwork down for running, and the other guy's just walking, he's doing the wrong footwork for running. You're doing the right footwork for running. You need to get there with combat. And there's combative footwork that I see very well discussed and taught in, I'll name a few arts here: boxing, Jeet Kune Do, Filipino Kali, the Kizi fighting method, and Indonesian Silat. Now, those are the 5 that I would say have excellent combat footwork. They really discuss, like, if you're moving and you're being bumped and pushed around, and not competitively, like roughly, and it's over like against a table, how to keep your feet underneath you, and how to be kind of a roving tank. You know, you've got your big guns up here, right? And your knees too. You got your knees, you got your elbows, and you've got your big guns. But in order to be able to deliver them, you have to be in a good position, right? And to keep that good position is the same thing as learning how to dance. Dancing has a different footwork than running. Running has a different footwork than walking. If you're just assuming that you know how to walk and run, therefore you think, well, I know how to stand up, I can fight, right? Fighting is just about throwing the fists. No. I mean, you can get lucky, or you can, if the guy doesn't know that much and you're really, really good with your hands and you're really strong, maybe you're naturally talented, but like you were born with those fists or whatever. I don't know, you worked on a farm, you grew up on a farm, I don't know, and you've been baling hay or whatever. You can punch a tree and your fists are like rocks, and you need, maybe. For the vast majority of us, you really do need to learn footwork. And I honestly have, as I've gotten older, I've seen that is really important in combat. It's one of the most important things to be able to evade at range, but also be able to evade and control in range. It's not just your hands when you're grappling up top, when you're in the pummeling range and your guy's grabbing your neck and you're grabbing his and you guys are sort of jockeying for position. I promise you, if your feet are better than his, 80%, 90% of the time, it's going to help you out. Now, if you weigh like 90 pounds and your opponent is like, I don't know, he's lifted you off the ground because he's like a 280 pound, bodybuilder, and you're up in the air, then footwork doesn't apply because you've been lifted in the air. But every time your feet are on the ground and the opponent is standing, and even if you've kind of been knocked on your knees a little bit and you're trying to stand back up, just knowing how you can move and how the opponent can move and how to trip them up, knowing how feet work when they're trying to find balance, you can just bump them off and sometimes they just kind of fall over. They were leaning over and didn't even realize that they were off balance. Well, in this book, the Musashi Flex, I see that discussed in a way I have never seen it discussed before. I've read, I can just name so many books with battles in them, and great, well-described battles. Well, the narrative prose used, like Joe Abercrombie. If you guys ever read Joe Abercrombie's novels, the First Law trilogy, or even Game of Thrones, George R.R. Martin is pretty good about giving you the emotional and visceral feel of a fight and how things can suddenly not go your way when things were going your way. Martin is very, very good, if you guys don't know, with Game of Thrones, he's very, very good at making you feel things can go wrong at any moment, in any part of the story, right? Not just combat. Things can go wrong at a wedding, if you know what I mean, right? If you know, you know. So, in combat, though, in terms of describing it, the philosophy of it, this book right here goes into a pretty decent amount of philosophical insight. And there's actually some thinking. Steve Perry, the author, is actually, through the text of this Sci-Fi book, he is actually coming through with some truths that hit home. It's almost like it could be, its own sort of book about the meditations or the philosophy of martial arts. So if you want to both read a sci-fi book and get a cool action story and get some martial arts philosophy and thought through it and even some training tips, this is the one for it. I mean, I'll just read you one passage right here. At their hearts, martial arts were all about motion. In the simplest instance, if somebody came at you with mayhem in mind, and you weren't where they expected to connect with you when they got there, because either you moved out, in, sideways, or wherever, then you had the advantage. If you devised a system of motions that would allow you always to be somewhere else when an attacker charged, and you were able to capitalize on your position before he or she could recover, you'd win the exchange. One battle did not a war necessarily make, and certainly any motion would have to account for all kinds of variables, distance, size, local gravity. Because it's a sci-fi book, they go to different planets, so that's also cool. They have to think about what planet you're on sometimes because the gravity is higher. But if you could get to the most efficient way of moving at a particular instant, you'd have something there. A lot of fighters Morn had. This next paragraph kind of hits home for me. A lot of fighters that Morn had met over the years had come up with combinations of arts, or created their own, using others for a base. Sometimes these were better, sometimes not. And here's the salient bit. The temptation was to take an old established fighting system and throw out everything that you saw as useless, keeping only the best moves. Some systems, this was a mistake. What you thought was a worthless move might have real value down the line when you were able to see the system as a whole. Monostylists got to the top just as often as eclectics. It depended on the style and the player. That's true. That's true. I mean, you've heard me talk on some of these other videos about, using only the big bombs. But you've also heard me say, look, if you happen to be a mutant that can just punch with your balled fist, and you can punch a tree. I've met those people. They can just punch a tree, and their wrist is fine. I mean, maybe when they get older, they'll regret it, but they're able to do that. If you're in a self-defense situation and there's something that that works, sure, absolutely use it. And also at the same time, if you're taking a martial art where you see something as useless, the temptation can be to go, well, throw that away. I don't need it. If you're a long-time practitioner, not just you're going to do it for 6 months to learn a little bit of self-defense before you go to a dangerous part of the world or something, I don't know what you need it for, but if you're just training for a little bit, maybe not. But if you're going to be lifelong, even just like a lifelong hobbyist, maybe it's not your number one passion, but you like it, then I'm definitely going to say that stick with things that you think you're not going to like. Do that technique. I promise you it's going to pay off. It may not seem like it. It's kind of like when I learned to draw. There might be techniques when you draw the head, they have a thing called the Loomis method. But they have different the Reed method. They have different methods for drawing the head. And at some point you're going to go, this is freaking useless. I don't need this anymore. Surely I don't need this. And it's weird that if you just keep doing it for a while, you'll at least take some of that technique with you. Even if you don't draw the full head the full way that they do the Loomis method, you'll keep some of it, and it will actually help you. The same way with martial arts. You need to stick with maybe a takedown or a throw. Just try it. I'm talking about if you're long term. Just try it for a while. Don't give up on that technique, because the temptation, like he says in the book, is to throw that away immediately. I think some people even misinterpret Bruce Lee when Bruce Lee said, you want to absorb what is useful, discard what is useless, in order to create what is essentially your own. Useless doesn't mean that you tried it one time and you go, this is useless. Or you tried it 10 times. You need to give it a real college try. If you're going to be in it for the long haul, and then you will slowly figure out moves that you don't like. But there's some things I never thought I'd like. I can't believe once upon a time I hated hammer fists, guys. I just thought I wanted to punch like this, just a straight punch, vertical and horizontal, horizontal punching. I wanted to do just that. And I was made to do hammer fists on all these combinations. I started trying it out in sparring, and after a little while I was like, this is the best way to punch for me. Guys, I think hammer fists are kind of awesome. I would have discarded that if my instructor hadn't said, no, you're going to keep doing this. So that's not even a review of this book. It's my suggestion that if you are a book reader at all, or if you just like sci-fi and martial arts or whatever, this book kind of flies by. It's like 320 pages. It is action packed. It's got cool characters. It's got a cool setting. If you like cyberpunk kind of stuff, you're going to get all that, and you're going to get kind of a treatise on martial arts and kind of how to make your own. This book, when I read it back in 2006, I had one. I think I just had my second black belt at that time, and I remember reading this and going, I wonder if I can create my own martial art. And guess what? I have. 3 different times I have sat down and created a curriculum, and it has been eye-opening to create a new martial art. Like, even though I don't intend, I've only taught it kind of to a friend of mine who's also in the martial arts. I've shown him some stuff from it. But I don't necessarily I'm not gonna open a school anytime soon and make this my own thing. But it was incredibly rewarding to be able to, like, what if I were to make a curriculum from the bottom up, like the school of me, the martial arts school of me, from my body and my body type and the way I think and the way I approach combat. How would I make that curriculum? I mean, the guy kind of breaks it down in this book. So I highly recommend it. That is The Musashi Flex by Steve Perry. I hope you guys got something out of this. I hope you get a chance to read it and enjoy it. And if you have book recommendations, please either message me or drop it in the comments or whatever, as they say. I can't believe I just said drop it in the comments for the first time ever. But go ahead, I guess. Drop it in the comments. Because I do live off of book recommendations. I read, you can see behind me, I just read and read comic books, novels, manga. I read not just American novel, English novels. I'll find English translations of whatever you got. So I'll put it on my reading list. All right, guys. Well, until next time, I hope you guys have a great day, and have a good one. See you.